After the border was established between Canada and the United States on the 49th parallel, a dispute broke out over where was the border through the San Juan Islands. The British sent troops, the Americans sent troops, and we had a standoff here for nearly 8 years and a fight over a pig when one of the farmers' pigs was shot. When I was a little kid on Bainbridge Island studying history, this blockhouse was on the front cover of our history book. This little blockhouse was built to protect the British garrison here on San Juan Island. It truly is one of my favorite places. This is the Martin Ranch on the upper Skagit River. It's such a beautiful place. When Henry Martin arrived in Mount Vernon as an immigrant looking for farmland, he discovered that most of the Skagit Valley was taken. But he looked for woodland because he was from New Brunswick and he wanted to live in the woods. The timber was so thick here that oftentimes they couldn't tell what time of day it was. There wasn't enough area to grow grass for a cow, and so they grow mangel-wurzels, big European turnips to feed to the cows in their slice. It was not easy times. It was a 2-mile walk to the little schoolhouse that they constructed for the other kids that lived in this area. The kids had to cross the Skagit River on a log to get to the schoolhouse. Everything had to go to Mount Vernon by canoe and come back by canoe. A 50-mile trip on the river. It was an amazing society because there was no money, so they had to barter for everything. This family raised chickens and they used the eggs to barter at the store for salt and sugar and things that they couldn't produce on the farm. One time during the Depression in the 1890s, the only money they had in the house for over a year was a 50 cents piece. They raised 9 children here, and one of their children, Fred Martin, went on to become a state senator and director of the state's agricultural programs. He was an amazing guy. Fred Martin realized as time went by and he returned to his place of birth that American bald eagles came here every year to feed on the salmon in the upper Skagit River. In those days, most Americans had not seen an eagle. They didn't even know what they looked like in the wild. But here they gathered by...
I was just floored over the weekend that our federal government murdered another American citizen. I shudder to think what would happen in our state if the same approach were applied to my city or to Speaker Jenkins' city. The kind of unrest and violence that probably would be provoked. I don't know. Wow, I can't believe that our government is doing that to our citizens. So, you know, as we've been saying all along this session, we are prepared to act, and we are acting to try to do everything that we can to protect the citizens of Washington from a hostile and malevolent federal government. We're going to take a big step tomorrow on the Senate floor by passing Senator Valdez's bill about banning masking of law enforcement, so that at least we can have some accountability about who the people are who are doing these kinds of actions, abducting people without consequence, literally killing American citizens now, too, in Minneapolis. We are also in the rules meeting right in this room a little bit later on tomorrow. We'll be moving the flock camera automated license plate reader restrictions bill to the floor and expect to take action on that this week. But, I think we and our colleagues in the House are just outraged, distressed, and trying to figure out all of the ways that we can make sure that people here are protected against their government. And I just never thought I'd be saying that.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Peterson. I'm here today with our Majority Leader, Joe Fitzgibbon, and Floor Leader, Monica Stonier. I mean, I would say, just like Senator Peterson has said, I began this week with an incredibly heavy mix of emotions, as it did, I think, my entire caucus. When you think about people some of whose names we know and many whose names we don't know, but Keith Porter and Renee Good and Alex Preddy dying at the hands of ICE, and 40 other people from across the United States, Americans who have died in ICE custody during this time. It's deeply troubling and disturbing. And I think our constituents are asking us to do something, and to do as much as we can in this situation that we're in. I do really want to thank Governor Ferguson and Attorney General Brown for their press conference yesterday, talking about what they are working on doing to help Washingtonians in case ICE launches similar attacks here in Washington State. And we will work cooperatively, fully engaged with them to protect this Washington, to protect people who live in this Washington. The actions that ICE is taking across the nation are having an effect here in this Washington. It's creating incredible distrust of our first responders in the state, who we have spent the last decade building the number of first responders we have, getting them trained really well in 21st century policing. Everything that ICE is not doing right and is doing horrifically, our people are generally trying to do in this state, yet their federal actions are harming our first responders and are harming Washingtonians. So Senator Peterson mentioned the bill, a number of the bills that we've worked. We have companion bills in the House on these topics, so we've also heard the bills. We also I think we'll have a bill on protecting emergency response operations that partially that'll move out of committee this week. And so we've got a whole kind of list and package of bills that we're working on. We know that we can't completely control ICE. We know that we have to do the things that we can do to control their malevolent actions. I think some just think that we should just shut up about it and pretend it's not happening. That is just not what the people of this state expect of us at all. They expect us to speak up and to act and to do things to protect them. Meanwhile, we've got a federal government that has continued through their tariffs, through the ICE actions, through everything they're doing to make us a less secure state, to make us a less prosperous place unless you're a billionaire, and to make us more vulnerable than we've ever been before. So we will not stop talking about this, stop taking action to try and help Washingtonians. And one of the things that I would really invite is I hope that we can gain Republican colleagues to do the same thing. With that, I think we would be open to questions.
Senator Peterson, same question probably for Speaker Jenkins, but when we started on the initiatives. In the Senate, those initiatives have arrived and they've been directed to committees. Will you allow the committee chairs to decide whether or not to have a hearing?
I don't think that I have ever, in my time, told a committee chair to hear something or not to hear something. But I think that our caucus is aligned completely around the idea that there is no good that comes out of hearing. The initiatives, like most initiatives to the legislature, will just proceed to the ballot.
Speaker Jenkins, in the House, they have not been sent to committee. Is that a leadership decision, or is that just coming, that you'll send it to committees? And if they do go to committees, you too have, your chamber has also not told chairs what to do. Will you allow them to decide if they want to have a hearing?
They'll both go to the Education Committee. I think my attorney may correct me with this when I get back, but I think it's because we haven't been in open session. We refer bills that way, so they'll be referred probably tomorrow. I, like Senator Peterson, when I became Speaker, one of the things I said is I'm not interested in telling chairs what they can and can't hear. I'm interested in conversations with chairs. Chair Santos and I have had many conversations, as have we had conversations with the caucus, and I think it's the same answer as Senator Peterson.
So Representative Santos has told you she won't hold a hearing?
Correct. We're aligned. We're aligned.
Thank you.
On the face covering bill, is there a timeline, assuming it passes tomorrow, for the House to pass it, given the emergency clause?
We'll hear it. I mean, it has to come over. We have to hear it. I think it's a very important bill, and I think it'll move fairly quickly, but probably not until House of Origin cutoff. We don't usually hear bills coming from the other body till after House of Origin cutoff. It's not an absolute, but haven't talked about hearing it earlier. There's I think all the time that we've got is scheduled right now in that committee.
Well, and we'll have passed your civil rights and judiciary, both of us having lived this world, Representative Taylor would have had to get in her agenda for next week already yesterday.
Correct.
And you won't have the paper on this to get it referred till the end of the week. So there isn't, and then we'll be in fiscal time and then floor time. So realistically, that's probably the soonest that it can happen.
There's a Senate bill that would restore funding to the Washington College Grant and Washington College-bound scholarships, cuts that were made during the 2025 session. I was wondering if that's a proposal that has support in your caucuses.
Do you want to talk about budget stuff?
It's something that'll be considered in the context of our operating budget development. I think there are many reductions to higher ed and more broadly that we have caucus members that would like to reverse. I think it's too early for us to say what reductions from last year we will be able to reverse, if any. But it does fall into just the constellation of difficult decisions that we're going to be making in the operating budget.
There's a bill that's going to be heard in the House today. It would limit recipients of non-emergency charity care to people only living in Washington State. What is your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we're hearing that today, as you mentioned, right? So we know that our border communities face challenges when we have an influx of folks coming for services that are available in Washington State, and the charity care issue in a particular hospital on the eastern border of our state, I know, has raised some concerns, and I'm looking forward to the hearing today because this is a new issue to me on that committee, but I've heard about it in my office a little bit, so I think after today we'll have a better idea of what the problem is and what the reasonable solution is.
And I'll just say, I spent some time over in Pend Oreille County last fall and was in Newport, and what I heard there from the hospital CEO was that something approaching 40% of all of the charity care that they were giving was to Idaho residents. Idaho, which has, well, let's just say kindly, not even come close to approaching the kinds of healthcare protections that we have in our state. So they've got uninsured people who are then coming across and essentially overwhelming this border community in terms of their resources. So I think I let Representative Abel know that I was very open to that concept. I actually signed on as a co-sponsor of Senator Short's companion bill for that reason.
And this is another example of what happens with national politics at our state level. Over and over again, what we are finding is that the state has to spend more resources taking care of people that should have access to health care in their own state, but the federal government's actions make it that people don't get the help they need, and they come to Washington state to get that help. Our voters over and over again keep telling us they want health care, they want education, they want resources for the most vulnerable. And yet again, we have the states that surround us who don't provide those services, and we are left making sure we're taking care of all people coming into the state. I cannot stress how critical it is that we have a federal government that is interested in helping people and making sure people are healthy, safe, and housed. Washington continues to make sure we're helping everyone, and our budgets can't continue to sustain that. And that is the reality of where we're living right now.
Representative Jenkins, you mentioned incredible distrust being sown by the ICE actions. I'm hearing that same sentiment from Washingtonians on all the fraud that's been coming out in recent weeks and months, whether it's the daycare stuff or the CRP programs. There are two bills in Senate Housing tomorrow. One is Braun's bill, 6205. The other is Senator Gainer's bill, 6167, to limit grants and loans and make sure that there is some oversight. Any leadership support for those two bills?
Those are Senate bills, so
I'm sure you're aware of them, though, because it's been in the news.
we're not.
We pay attention to House bills.
Actually, no.
Okay, then I'll ask the Senate. Then I'll ask the Senate side.
I have about 1,000 House bills that I have to pay attention to, so I usually wait.
And I guess what I'll say is, look, we are as troubled as anyone by allegations of fraud or misuse of funds. That program that Representative Taylor and my former seatmate, Speaker Chop, really helped to get in place is answering a really historic set of injustices faced by Black people in our state. And we want the program to work well, to have the confidence of everyone in the public. So I absolutely open to ideas from all corners about how to make sure that there's good accountability and that we have good spending of in a program that is really necessary for correcting those historic injustices.
And I'll just add, we're seeing this anti-government rhetoric at the national level. But let's be very clear, in Washington, we have checks and balances. We have systems in place that provide the ability to identify when things are going wrong and a process in making sure we're addressing it. And what I will say is that in this Washington, there is accountability, there's transparency, and people take action when they hear of any fraud or misuse of funds. And that is what continues to happen.
And we actually have some really good examples of, I think, of just exactly that thing. So I agree with both of what Senator Peterson and Senator Dingra have said. But so, for example, it is challenging, for example, when you continue to have completely baseless claims being made, especially in areas regarding voter fraud. But in fact, what we have, the most recent case in Pasco, 4 voters didn't have any, had no effect on the outcome of an election, but that was discovered by the Secretary of State and the local auditors.
Right.
And our system actually worked. And so making sure that you have a system that works so actually things aren't ground to a halt with baseless claims, is also really an important thing, and that's why having these checks and balances, so you can kind of push some aside that are just kind of random finger pointing, and then really
I'm not sure what you're
focus
referring
on
to as random
other
finger
things
pointing.
like that.
Anything that I've reported on has been backed up by fact. But the auditor said she's not willing to open her audit. The AG says he's not investigating. DCYF is sending us to DSHS Oversight Board, and they're not responding. And Secretary Sen seems to be MIA. So where is that accountability at this point is my question.
What are you talking about? Are you mixing up
CRP
things?
fraud and the daycare fraud.
Why would Secretary Sen be investigating CRP?
I was talking about DCYF with her.
I don't understand your question.
Oh.
I would like to circle back to Senate Bill 5855 about the law enforcement face coverings. So if it does get to the governor's desk, I'm wondering if you guys can share a little bit about any immediate changes that Washington residents might be able to see, and then more long-term changes that might come out of this bill.
So this bill basically impacts federal ICE agents. Our Washington law enforcement officers follow the rules of the state of Washington. And so their manner of identifying themselves does not change. And in fact, Senator Holy actually made it a point to check in with the Criminal Justice Training Commission to see if any of our Washington law enforcement officers have ever violated the identification rule, and they haven't. So this is very specifically a federal ICE agent issue only. They're the ones who are hiding themselves. And so that is what the bill is supposed to impact. So I see no impact on our local law enforcement. It is completely up to the federal agents and how they decide to comport themselves. But this bill does have a private right of action. And so individuals who are subject to I would say, illegal behavior on the part of federal agents will now be held accountable.
I have a follow-up, I guess, on the face covering bill. I mean, the state has limited authority at best to regulate federal law enforcement. A similar ban in California is already being litigated. I mean, what makes you think that this policy can survive legal scrutiny?
Well, you know, look, as you say, it's not, the question is being litigated in California. We don't know the answer. So there's, at a minimum, there is a benefit in what my law school procedure professor used to call norm enunciation, right? We have a very clear understanding in our state that law enforcement, with certain limited exceptions for undercover work, ought not to be masked when they're presenting. In fact, you know, a few years ago, we had, as part of the police accountability reforms, we had some folks who were covering up their badge numbers, and we made clear that that should not happen, right? We have a clear expectation for law enforcement in our state that it should happen openly. We should know who the people are, that they have the authority, and what those interactions should be. So we are, at a minimum, enunciating that norm of behavior in our state. In addition, I think what we've heard from the Attorney General is that there is a good case for us to be able to impose, and I'll disagree slightly with Senator Dinger just to say that although the effect may be only on ICE because they're the only ones who are violating this norm, the law is intended to apply evenly across all types of law enforcement, local, state, federal, UN, I mean, whatever. It applies to everyone who wants to do work here. And in the same way that we were able to apply a law of general application at the detention center in Tacoma and say that they had to pay minimum wages to people who did work there, including detainees, I think that we have a reasonable argument that all law enforcement doing work in our state ought to be held to the same standard.
And I'll just say I love being corrected by Senator Peterson. He is correct. It does apply to everybody, but it does not impact our local law enforcement because they're already following the laws of this land, which are about identification.
With the exception of perhaps one member of local law enforcement has indicated their desire to
Ask
actually
everyone,
flout
yeah.
that law
Yes.
if it passes.
But right now they are,
that's a
following
problem.
it. That's a different problem. It's a different bill. But we've never been in a situation where the federal government is creating this level of uncertainty on public safety. Because we actually have people we can't identify pulling over people. We actually had a case out in Redmond where the car was on the side of a freeway running, and the person in it was kidnapped and taken to a different location. People don't know who these individuals are. They don't know if they're actually acting under the authority of law. They have no idea whether they have any papers giving them right over basically kidnapping individuals without identifying themselves. This is something that doesn't happen in law-abiding societies, especially in the United States of America. And so this is our time for the states to push back as much as we can, because people are scared. I look around this room, and I can tell you very clearly that immigrants in this state are petrified. People do not leave their house without identification. And we know that even if you carry your passport or your ID, these federal agents don't care whether you're a citizen. They're literally killing people. And so our norms on what happens between state law and federal law and the relationship there, this is not normal in America. And we have to make sure we're providing our residents and our attorney generals and other lawyers every single tool possible to make sure they can stand up for Washingtonians. But we cannot have people being kidnapped and murdered on our streets.
There's a bill being heard later this week in the House that would prohibit ICE agents who were hired under Trump's second term from later becoming law enforcement in Washington state. I'm wondering if there's any appetite from either of your caucuses to move that legislation.
I think this was a fairly new bill. It was filed last week. So I think there are probably a lot of questions about it and about what we do. I think our interests as Washingtonians are very focused on making sure that we recruit the right kinds of people to go into public safety jobs who have the right orientation about public safety and who have the right kinds of training. We've seen nationally that ICE, and there have been lots of kind of exposés about this, like people who just show up and they are like, here, okay, great, you're an ICE agent. And they have weapons and other sorts of things and no training happening and stuff like that. So I think there's strong interest in making sure that our public safety community has the right kind of training, all that kind of stuff. I haven't reviewed the details of the bill, so I think that'll become more clear as we move along here.
And I'll tell you, in the last, I even want to say 20 years, the culture of policing in Washington has been changing. We've had multiple directors of the CJTC talk about how we need law enforcement to be guardians of our community and not warriors in our street. Because we don't need warriors in our street. We need guardians in our community. And so that culture of policing has been changing and moving in very positive ways. We're seeing more and more community collaboration. We're seeing trust between community members and law enforcement. And all of that has happened because we have guardians of our community. And that is a culture we have to continue to protect and make sure we're moving towards. So I haven't seen this bill, but that is a conversation worth having, because everyone is safe, including our law enforcement officers, when there's trust between the community and law enforcement officers. And I would hate to see the progress we've made in the last few years, a few decades, erode because of some bad agents. So I know the CGT is very committed in making sure we understand where everyone is trained, the background they come from, and making sure that the values align with being guardians of our community.
I think we've invested a lot of time and funds to strengthen our law enforcement workforce over the years. I had the troopers in my office this morning talking about how retention and training and support has strengthened the workforce across the state, and particularly in Clark County from the troopers reporting to me this morning. Our training facilities now, our regional training facilities, are turning out law enforcement peace officers who are from our communities, who look like our communities and are well-trained. So as long as we're on that path, I think, that whether or not the bill is consistent with that mission or not, I don't know. I'll take a closer look at it. But we've got to stay the course on the public safety efforts and investments that we've made that have good results. And I think we all get emails from Senator Lubbock about who's graduating and who's training where around the state. So we have pretty good visibility on what's working. We'll keep the course there.
The income tax, will we see a bill introduced this week, or will it be next week?
I am absolutely hoping for this week.
Like Friday or sooner?
It won't be sooner than Friday, I don't think. But we have meetings later today. We have been circulating drafts among a lot of tax experts and potentially affected people, and have gotten quite a bit of feedback. We're in the process of incorporating that into the introduction draft, and I think I'm more optimistic than
I was going to say,
than
this may
Lori
be
is.
like the biggest disagreement you see between Senator Peterson and I. He's very optimistic this week. I am also very optimistic this week, but it may be next week.
Okay.
So that's about the distinction between us.
Well, and part of that, look, I could drop a bill tomorrow, but I think one of the things that we're really committed to is working collaboratively on this. I think we have really good alignment on the direction between the House and the Senate, and the governor for that matter. And so we're just trying to make sure that we're doing this carefully and step by step so that it's done correctly.
The draft that could come out, or the bill that would be introduced this week or next week, the offsets will be included in that text?
That is still to be completely decided exactly how, but we will either have the offsets in the actual bill, or we will have a roadmap for what they would be that would point to other bills. Either of those is still possible. But
so
it'll be obvious when the bill is filed what those offsets will be.
Whether it's in bill language or not, we intend to have at least an initial
plan for
proposal or concept released at the same time as the bill is introduced.
I understand, but it could be two separate bills.
That's one possibility.
That's one possibility, and one possibility is it's the same bill.
The House Housing Committee has delayed an executive session on HB 2049, which would prohibit local jurisdictions from enforcing anti-camping regulations or other life-sustaining activity unless there's adequate shelter space available. I was just wondering if there's any update on that legislation, on if it would be heard in executive session next week, or kind of what the status of it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a priority bill that I'm not sure why it maybe was held up. If it's a matter of, I know one of my bills is held up because I have to get my amendment ready. So there's a number of reasons why that could happen. I don't have an update on why that's been held up, but it's been a lot of interest. I've had a lot of emails from Vancouver on that bill with some competing interests. So I imagine there's some discussion happening there before they move it out.
It's a complex issue with a lot of, intensity. And so none of us are on the housing committee, but what I would interpret from that is that they're taking their time to decide if they do move it forward, how do they get it right? But it's certainly got interest from communities across the state in what role the state has in regulating what local governments can do to prohibit camping.
On the tort liability issue, is there a sense on the budget side of how you might be looking to handle that in your budget proposals? Are you aligned with how the governor has moved forward on that, his plan?
I think the governor was assuming a 7% savings. And I think there's a lot of guesswork on what kind of savings would be had. And I think the hour-and-a-half hearing today clearly showed that a lot of the cities and the counties and the schools definitely do believe that there will be savings. And a lot of the savings, I want to be very clear, will be on the attorney fees and the cost of litigation. The bill as it currently is does not in any way limit claimants' right to a jury trial. It does not cap any damages, and it does not cap attorney fees. but the savings to be had would be in a process that helps in early resolution and in making sure we're not spending as much money on legal fees. So 7%, I don't know. I'll let the fiscal people make that final
This is a
decision.
very challenging area in which to forecast costs. There's a lot more. It's a small number of cases that drives a large expenditure. And so the variability in tort liability is greater than you would see in, FTEs at the Department of Corrections, for example.
Representative Michael Keaton has introduced that House joint memorial asking the governor to opt the state into the $1,700 federal tax credit for education, and then people could send that wherever they wanted, whether it's public education, private education, tutoring, transportation. The estimates are that it would generate more than $700 million a year for education in our state. But again, the governor has to opt us in. Have any of you had conversations with him about his, where he's leaning on that, and do you support opting the state in?
Well, House Joint Memorial is, I think, when we're thinking about limited floor time, it's not a bill that directs anything. I'm not sure if I haven't had a conversation with Representative Keaton about it. We sit on the Education Committee together, so there are opportunities for us to chat about it if he's interested in talking to me or other members. I know when we have requests or desires or questions for the governor, we can request a meeting and maybe talk to him about that. So I'm not sure if Representative Keaton has done that yet or plans to. But in this case, a measure like this doesn't have a lot of impact policy-wise or provide much direction. We lovingly call them letters to Santa Claus often on the floor because they're a message. I'm interested in what that message is, looking forward to talking to him about it. But at this point, I have no information from Representative Keaton about what his desires are with this.
But just generally, would you support
The
opting in?
vast majority of kids in our state go to public school. And our paramount duty, directed by the Constitution, is to provide a great public school system to help our kids succeed and thrive. Our focus is on making sure that we have a well-funded and well-functioning public school system.
Well, this could provide money for public schools.
That is I guess that's one perspective about it. Another perspective is that it is a giant diversion of resources out of the public schools.
No, it doesn't divert any money out of public schools.
I guess I respectfully disagree.
Representative Stonier, you have House Bill 1607 concerning adopting a recycling program, kind of similar to Oregon. I'm curious what kind of ground that has in your caucus.
Yeah, I think we're going to see that on the exec list this week, maybe tomorrow. We've seen it be successful getting out of appropriations, and since last year, there have been a lot of improvements to the bill in response to some of the industries and businesses that would be impacted, but also in terms of making sure that broadly communities in rural and urban spaces have access to the refund opportunities. So I think we've improved there. We've also done a really good job of educating members on the technology that's out there that even folks in Oregon with the most recent and up-to-date technology can benefit from investing. We're at a point in time where if we invest in that now, we can take advantage of technology that can sort and return those refunds at a much faster rate than even in Oregon. So I think members are excited about it, learning about it, still have a lot of questions. I'm certainly seeing some pushback, but I think it's an opportunity for folks to remember that these deposits wouldn't even be imposed for another 4 years. So we have an opportunity to get a solid program up and running in the state before folks are impacted by the deposit. We want to make sure they can get their refunds. And so we've been working on a version that'll get us there. Looking forward to talking with members of the House, and I know the Senate has some champions over there that have been talking with their members. So we'll see what happens when we get to the floor.
Any chance we see a floor vote on the BAC bill tomorrow in the Senate?
I think there's a strong chance.
Anything else? Thank you.